we've always been eating meat. That's the standard. We know that's good. Plant-based, that's the new intervention. You need to prove that's better. We've already established meat's good.
Yeah.
You need to prove that plants are better. So we don't have to, you have to prove that meat. No. That's established. You're the new guy. Well, you can't even get basic nutrition from a vegan diet. Like there's simply nutrients that don't exist in plants, and so you have to supplement. If you have to supplement, then by definition your diet is deficient, and that's obviously not what we evolved on. That's what fiber is, right? It's cellulose. And that's how they increase the fiber content in processed foods. They actually add sawdust to it. So there's dozens of products that just have added sawdust.
I do want to ask this. I know you probably mentioned it, but since we're kind of talking about fiber here, obviously like Layne Norton does love fiber, and he talks about the benefits that it's going to have long term, because he references the research that always shows that fiber has a positive effect on all-cause mortality. And when you take it out, there's a negative effect to no fiber. So when you hear those people continue to reference the long-term studies when it comes to fiber, it makes you wonder, damn, well, should I just at least keep a little bit of it in just to be safe, since I don't know, like, if long-term carnivore is the better idea? Like, do you think that there's any argument for keeping a little bit of it in your diet just in case?
That was the same argument for cholesterol and sugar, actually. That was what Ansel Keys said, was that, whether or not cholesterol causes a problem, what's the big deal? What's the harm? Why don't you just cut it out, replace it with sugar, replace these calories with sugar, because you need these calories. So what do you replace fat calories with? You replace them with carb and sugar calories. That was the argument since like the 50s. Yeah. Was that cholesterol is bad, replace that with sugar. That was the argument. And they said, what's the harm? Why don't you just do it just in case? And he convinced a lot of people to do that. I always have a problem with this whole all-cause mortality thing, because it doesn't matter what you ate for breakfast if you die in a plane crash, right? So, I mean, it's a bit funny. And when you look at epidemiological studies, there so many different factors that come in. They're called confounding factors. So many different things that could influence all these different outcomes, right? So someone who eats more fiber, is someone who, that's a different group of people than it's just, I specifically won't eat that. Most of the time, people that are not eating fiber are eating a bunch of processed garbage that doesn't have fiber, because you can't freeze processed foods with fiber in it. It gets all mushy and mealy and doesn't work out. So if you're freezing and refrigerating all these processed garbage that's just going out, these ready-made meals, they often don't have a lot of fiber. So you're comparing apples and oranges, because you're comparing a group that eats more whole foods.
So you think it's more of a healthy user bias?
100%. But also, you have to compare like to like, because we're not comparing. Those studies compare people eating a standard diet, which is arguably crap. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, with someone who's eating something else, anything else. I think anything else is probably going to be better, right? It is not comparing an animal-based low fiber diet with a whatever high fiber diet. That is not the comparison. So it's comparing apples and oranges. I don't think you can make that comparison. Also, there's a ton of other factors that go into this. Dr. Baker talks about this, but a lot of these studies that show, that suggest that meat was harmful, say, these people ate more meat and they had, higher all-cause mortality. Okay, well, people have been told for the last 40 years that red meat's going to kill you. And there's certain people, usually guys, just say, screw it. I like steak. I'm going to eat it. The people that have the, screw it attitude with steak are more likely to have a screw it attitude with, cigarettes and drinking, driving fast. They're more likely to die in a car accident. They're more likely to die in extreme sports. So that contributes to your all-cause mortality. Is that because they ate a steak that morning? Or is that because they jumped out of an airplane? I don't know. I think it's probably the airplane, right? And so there's all those factors that come into it. I think that you have to look at things, comparing like to like. We don't have these epidemiological studies, even epidemiological studies that compare, a whole food plant-based diet and a whole food meat-based diet. We just don't have those, right? We do have, I'll talk about two studies on fiber, and I'll remember this one.
You got to think too, like our ancestors probably didn't have IBS, Crohn's disease, gluten
rarely.
intolerances, or any of these things.
Yeah.
People like, from thousands of years ago when they primarily were living on meat. So I find it interesting in today's world that we have to find proof that we could eat that way when clearly we have eaten that way
Very good point.
many times throughout history.
Very, very good point. And that's what I heard another clinician say. We've always been eating meat. That's the standard. We know that's good. Plant-based, that's the new intervention. You need to prove that's better. We've already established meat's good.
Yeah.
You need to prove that plants are better. So we don't have to, you have to prove that meat. No. That's established. You're the new guy. As far as fiber, there was one interventional trial that we really know about. It's not that great. So this is an actual interventional trial. This is not just epidemiological, study that can have a lot of different flaws in it. Some can be done very well. Others, when they correct for these factors. And that's another thing. Sorry, with the epidemiological studies looking at red meat, a lot of these things, or meat in general, they call different things meat that just are not meat. So they say that, since pizza toppings can sometimes be meat, therefore pizza's meat. So you say, I eat pizza 3 times a week. You eat pizza 3 times. You eat meat 3 times a week. Like, not really,
Yeah.
And so these people are just playing games, really. And so there's an interventional trial with fiber. 75 people, not a big study, but it's like the only interventional study we have on fiber. And they split them up into 4 groups. They all had GI issues. They all had sort of problems in with their gut and their bowels and things like that. Not as far as like Crohn's and things like that, but they all had problems. And they split them up into groups that stayed the same amount of fiber, increased the fiber, or reduced the fiber, and then eliminated fiber. So those 4 groups. And wouldn't you know it, the more fiber people had, the worse their gut issues got. The less fiber they had, the better the gut issues got. And the people that eliminated fiber completely resolved their gut issues. Small study, but it was an interventional trial that actually showed some actual data. So I mentioned that we don't have these epidemiological comparisons of whole food plant-based, whole food meat-based. But what we do have is a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association, again, JAMA, published in 1931, looking at 2 African tribes that conveniently had nearly polar opposite diets and live right next to each other. And so they intermarried. And so they were genetically very similar. Mm-hmm. One was the Maasai, which people know eat a lot of meat, drink milk, and drink blood. And the other one was the Akikiu, who had been displaced from their land, weren't able to really eat what they traditionally did, and they actually went more to a more plant-based diet. So this is a vegan's dream, right? This is the middle of Africa. There's no pesticides. There's no industry sort of farming. This is whole food plants and tubers and very little meat. And they compared and looked at the difference. They found massive health differences and developmental differences between the 2 groups. The Maasai adult men were on average 5 inches taller than the Akikiu, much more muscular, had better bone development, better teeth development. The Akikiu had multiple different problems with their development, bone density. They had different vitamin and mineral deficiencies, iron deficiencies. They were more likely to be anemic. They got sick much more easily, and they found a number of different sort of blood markers that were deficient. Maasai, they did not. They were very, very healthy. Did not really get sick. Didn't have these developmental issues. Didn't get cavities. Didn't have crowded teeth and smaller jaws, which the Akikiu did, which actually been shown to be purely nutritional. Really, it's just nutritional deficiencies. Your jaw and teeth don't develop properly, and they tried interventions as well, and they tried just supplementing. Because like vegans and vegetarians will say, well, you can get all the nutrients you need. You don't have to kill animals. Well, but you have to take supplements. And that's a fine argument. But then they go further to say, well, actually, this is beneficial. This is the best way to eat. This is what we're supposed to be. And it's like, well, you can't even get basic nutrition from a vegan diet. Like there's simply nutrients that don't exist in plants. And so you have to supplement. If you have to supplement, then by definition, your diet is deficient. And that's obviously not what we evolved on. So they found that supplementation actually wasn't good enough either. They supplemented all these, these missing things that they were deficient in, and they found that didn't actually resolve their health issues. But when they started feeding them meat, it did. So there's more to it than just, these, vitamins and minerals. There's a lot of micronutrients, if you want to call it, that we haven't really even discovered yet, that are in meat that we absolutely have to have, that we don't necessarily have a blood test for yet. And so this was comparing like to like. This was comparing whole food, plant-based, whole food, meat-based, and there was a stark contrast. That's the only study we have. And I'm happy to do more. I think it's important to do more. I don't hang my hat on epidemiological studies that compare a plant-based intervention with a standard processed food garbage lifestyle. Yeah. All you can get from that is what it shows. You have, whole food diet is better than the standard diet. I agree with that. There's no problem there. But that doesn't translate to, a plant-based diet versus a meat-based diet. Whole foods on each. That does not prove anything in that direction.
You ever watch the show Alone? You ever heard of it?
No.
They're just like out in the wilderness, and they're like, they got to survive, and it's like
I think so. Yeah.
It's a survival show.
Yeah.
And this isn't like proof of anything, but it's not like they set those people up with Metamucil. You know what I mean? Like they don't have fiber. They don't have access to it. They have fibrous stuff they can get a hold of, berries and things like that. But the complaint and the reason why they get kicked off the show is because they lose too high of a percentage of their body weight.
Right.
They're only allowed to lose a certain amount of percentage, and then it gets to be too dangerous, and the weather gets cold and stuff like that. And they find less and less food, and they don't want people to starve and die from this TV show. So they'll helicopter them out of there when the time is appropriate. But they're not, they're losing the body weight because they can't find the two things that we really need that humans live off of, which is protein and fats.
Yeah.
They just can't find animals anymore.
Yeah.
And they can get berries and they get access to some stuff, but that stuff's not going to keep them alive.
Yeah, that's I remember actually seeing a couple episodes of that. And a lot of them did say that it was just like, you need fat. Like, this is really high fat. I'm going to store this in this jar, and that's really what's going to keep me as I get this fat. And some guy, I think he had like a Wolverine or something, like broke into his stores and just ate all the fat stores that he had, just went straight for the fat. We see this in other sorts of things.
The guy ended up killing the Wolverine, by the way, which is like the coolest part of the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
He got him like a couple days later. He's like, I think this is the same one. Son of a bitch.
Choke it up, spit it up. That was the thing too. Like, if you look at the accounts of like Lewis and Clark going across America, hundreds of years ago, they talk about that. They talk about how important fat was. That you had to get enough fat. So they were hunting and fishing and things like that. But they were saying that, and they fed all those sort of the organs and leaner cuts to the dogs, and it was really important for the people that have the fat. That's what kept them surviving. The people that weren't able to get enough fat, those are the guys who died.
Fiber has to be like a pretty new thing, especially in the amount and the tune like that I think it's what suggested that they say you get like 20 to 30 grams of fiber a day or something like that. It's like, how in the fuck would anyone ever get that?
Yeah, dude, I just eat some sticks, I mean, like, that's what fiber is, right? It's cellulose. And that's how they increase the fiber content in processed foods. They actually add sawdust to it. So there's dozens of products that just have added sawdust to it. And eventually, apparently, this is an essential nutrient. Essential meaning that you will die without it. When did that happen? Like, it's essential. How? Like, it's first of all, it's not a nutrient because we cannot break it down. We cannot get anything from it. So we're not getting any nutrition from it. So it cannot be a nutrient. So already right there, it's misnamed. But also, I mean, there's entire civilizations alive right now that eat no fiber generationally, right? If that's essential, then that doesn't work. The Maasai, the Inuit, the Native Australians, obviously all these peoples can incorporate into Western society and eat the same garbage we are. But traditionally, that's not what they ate. And people can say that, well, the Maasai, maybe they're eating some tubers, maybe the Australian Aborigines, or maybe they're eating some stuff as well. A lot of accounts will actually say that it's only when they're starving is when they eat that stuff. And when they have meat, they just eat meat. But you can't really argue with people living in the North Pole what they're eating, because there's no tubers, on these ice shelves that are just floating around the North Pole. They don't even have access to it. They don't have fiber. they poop just fine, and they people say, well, their average life expectancy is lower, like the Maasai, it's like 60 years. I was like, yeah, do you know what their infant mortality rate is outside of a hospital? It's pretty high, right? So your average life expectancy from birth is going to go down if 3 out of 5 of your kids are dying in infancy, obviously. That doesn't speak to how old people live when they die of old age, right? They're fighting lions with sticks and winning half the time, right? So these guys are living, in a very different, atmosphere than we are. And they're doing extraordinarily well. You don't live you cannot survive in those conditions if you're not thriving. You have to be extremely strong and robust. And they're doing very well without fiber. Fiber is not, it's, again, like, we cannot break down fiber. We cannot process fiber. All animals that consume fibrous plants have the ability to, through the bacteria in their guts, break down fiber into fat and protein. The animal kingdom runs on fat and protein. Carnivores, because they eat animals with fat and they go for the fat first. But also herbivores, because again, that's what they're absorbing. They're eating a bunch of fiber, but what they're absorbing is fat and protein. So a gorilla or a cow that's just eating leaves and grass, they still get 70 to 80% of their calories from fat, from the saturated fat that the bacteria are secreting as a byproduct of the fiber that they're eating. So the animal kingdom runs on fat and protein. And we are the only ones that have, lost that. There was, I forget the guy's name, but, he said that humans are the only animals smart enough to make our own food and the only ones dumb enough to eat it.